What's up, guys? I am back for my third video of the day. Um, Today we're gonna be doing a random review on the movie Last Boy Scout, which, in my opinion, very underrated action film. Honestly, it has Bruce Willis in it. It has Damon Wayans. It has young Danielle Harris, who's just coming off doing the Halloween movies, or Halloween 4 and 5. I think they're like the biggest names in this movie. Directed by Tony Scott, who never heard the name before, but when he looked in his fucking repertoire, he did fucking Beverly Hills Cop 2, True Romance, Man on Fire. It's like, oh, okay. This dude has a fucking resume. He's directed a lot of fucking. Sorry, guys. I fucking hate these flies too. But anyway, um, this movie is very underrated, honestly. It doesn't get talked about a lot. I just randomly found it like 3, 4 years ago, just looking in Bruce Willis's filmography, and I'm like, oh, is it Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans? Okay, I'll check this out. And it's a fun action movie. Like, it's kind of a comedy because it has a little bit of comedic elements to it. But I actually thought they had really good chemistry together in this movie. Surprisingly, actors you would not think would have chemistry. I actually low key wanted to. I would have been down for a sequel, even though it never happened. So, as usual, I'm gonna get into the review. So this movie opens with during a we have a cool little opening with this like rock song showing like the NFL. It's such a really fun opening, and then and then you get to the movie. The movie opens up with L.A. Stallions. Sorry, god damn. And if you hear like any humming, it's a fucking fan. It is hot as fuck today. Sorry, guys. Even right now. So we are introduced to LA Stallions running back Billy Cole, who gets a call from Milo, who's one of the bad guys of the film. Basically tells him, you better win this fucking game. Billy Cole then ingests PCP, brings a gun onto the field, and then he proceeds to shoot a few players and then himself. Very dark opening. I'm not gonna fucking lie. Very dark opening, especially compared to the fucking opening credits. Like, you got this rock song, very fun, and then just switch over to very dark opening. And then we're introduced to Jimmy Fields, who stops, I guess, one of his fellow players from raping a girl. And then we're now then introduced to Joel Hallenbeck, which is Bruce Willis's character. I'll admit, people try to sometimes shit on Bruce Willis by saying he kind of just plays the same character. I disagree. He doesn't feel like when I'm watching this movie, I don't see John McClane. You know what I mean? Like, you might think it because this is only about 3 years after the first Die Hard, and I think a year after Die Hard 2. And then a couple years before Die Hard with a Vengeance, which I'm gonna eventually get to those movies. And also, quick announcement: my next franchise will be Bad Boys, not Bad Boys, Men in Black. I will do the Bad Boys films eventually, though. But yeah, Men in Black, those three, which I love all of them. I mean, I think 1 and 3. This is just a side point. 1 and 3 are good. I think 2's like the weakest, but 2's still good. So I will review those next week. But back to this movie. We're introduced to Joel Hallenbeck, who's a private um, investigator who has a wife named Sarah, who works with Mike, who's one of his partners, who gives him a job. But then he finds out when he comes home. Really, I'm not gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. This scene is very well executed. He finds out his wife is cheating on him with Mike. Kind of sad. Because Mike's supposed to be like his best friend and his partner, and he fucking hooking up with his wife. He punches Mike, but then still ends up being like, I need the job. So he takes the job, and his job is to protect and bodyguard a girl named Corey, who's a stripper. And then when Mike gets in his car, gets blown up in a car bomb. And then throughout the film, well, we're also then we're at the club, and this is where we're introduced to Corey, who's played by Halle Berry, who she's not in the movie very long. Um, she's not in the movie very long, and who her boyfriend is Jimmy Fields, which is Damon Wayans' character, who I actually think Damon Wayans he did a really good job because even at this point he wasn't a lead actor. He was mainly the guy who was like the side character in like a lot of the Wayans movies. But I know him from My Wife and Kids because I used to watch that shit back in the day. But then in this movie, he's a former NFL player, like I mentioned. Him and Joe have like a little bit of a confrontation because he doesn't feel comfortable, this guy watching his girlfriend. So he starts some shit. Joe doesn't he doesn't really beat him up, but he like pushes him to the ground. Then Jimmy and Corey hook up. Then they end up trying to go back to her house. And when they get there, they run into these hitmen who kill Corey. And then Joe uh, saves Jimmy from getting killed in a shootout. Then the police show up, and then this is where we get Joe's like background. It turns out he's a former CIA, a Secret Service agent who used to work for this one guy who's like a senator who I guess was torturing a woman. I think they didn't like really go into detail. I guess I'll just say torturing a woman. And then he ends up stopping him, and that's what causes him to lose his job. So then Corey, then it turns out Joe and Jimmy start to work together. Joe, Jimmy demands we better work together. I gotta stop my girlfriend's killer. They agree to the heat. They end up going to Corey's house, and then this is where, and you can clearly tell like the detectives who were talking to Joe, they suspect he had something to do with it because they know about his past. So they find out that the senator and Senator Calvin, who that's the guy that Joe used to work for, and Sheldon Marcone, he's like the main bad guy of the film, are working together secretly, and that could be why Corey was killed. Very well done. I actually, surprisingly, when I watched this movie the first time, I'm like, Damon Wayans and fucking Bruce Willis have great chemistry together. You wouldn't think they would, but it's like you wouldn't think Jackie Chan and fucking Chris Tucker had great chemistry, and we got 3 Rush Hour movies out of that. So like that's one thing about Hollywood when it was great. You can get these pairings sometimes that like you would not think on paper they would work, but they do work. So, but then the tape ends up getting destroyed. So Joe ends up um this is where Joe ends up taking Jimmy back to his house. This is where we're introduced to Danielle Harris's character, Darian, who's his daughter. When they first meet, it's very much your standard father-daughter like argument stuff, and it was very fun. Like, y'all know I'm a Danielle Harris fan because the Halloween films, and she was also in the Hatchet movies. But she was okay in this film. She was very much the standard Hollywood daughter who has, like not resentment, but like that arguing thing with her father. Um, Then she goes to bed. Jimmy and we get a little bit more connection between Joe and Jimmy, but then Jimmy goes to the bathroom saying he needs to take a shower, but it turns out he's using painkillers in the bathroom. Joe kind of finds out and basically kind of punches him and then says, "You got to get the fuck out." So we get that little bitter argument, and I actually think it's a very well done scene. When Damon Wayans was like, "This is how the system does," not the government, but like the NFL system, the football system gets you. It's just very well done argument scene between the two. But then yeah, Jimmy gets kicked out, and then Darian admits to um, so Darian apologizes to him for being a bitch earlier, and then basically says that her father was actually a fan of Jimmy, and that's why like he was really mad about what happens. Like he's disappointed because he was his fan, so he leaves, and then the next morning, um, we are introduced to Milo, who's one of the bad guys of the film. Kidnaps Joe while Jimmy gets beat up by bad guys. Um, then Jimmy ends up like, okay, we gotta try to save Joe. And this is where we're introduced to the Marcone, who explains his plan to kill the senator and basically frame Joe for doing it because they know Joe called the senator. He used to work for the senator because the senator was abusing a woman, and Joe knew, and he got fired for that. So they use that to their advantage. The bad guys are very standard. This is the 80s and 90s where the bad guys aren't over. They're not like they don't go. The bad guys are just bad guys. They're evil. That is it. They don't. Some franchises do, but a lot of like the action movie ones, they're just bad guys who either doing drugs or sell drugs, stuff like that. They want it because Marcone wants to kill the senator because the senator is refusing to let him gamble. So Jimmy ends up trying to save Joe, and fucking Darian ends up stowing along. But Jimmy gets captured. Then the bad guys try to kill them, but Darian ends up kind of helping them escape by because she was basically a distraction, and Joe did puppets, and then when he was doing puppets, he had a gun, and then he started shooting. Cool action scene, cool action chase, crash. They crash into this house. But they think Milo is dead, but they have to go to the game to stop the bomb from being taken there. While this happens, Milo's actually still alive, kidnaps Darian and says, you know, so she gets kidnapped. So Joe and Jimmy work together, then they have to try to save Darian and stop the bomb. Then we have pretty much the rest of the film is action sequences. They end up saving Darian. Marcone leaves, and they said, because there's two cases. There's the part where throughout the film, they mention that there's a case with like a bunch of money in it. And Joe takes in Marcone, who's the bad guy of the film. He's not really the main. I feel like Milo's more the main bad guy, but Marcone's like the I guess symbol of the bad guy, in the sense like he's like the main head, but he's not the main bad guy. Like there's no final fight with him. He ends up getting a case, and then because there's a case with a bomb in it, and then there's a case with money in it. And he ends up taking the case with money in. God damn it, these fucking flies. A case with money in it, and then there's a case with a bomb in it. He ends up taking the case with the bomb. While Joe confronts fucking Milo. Quick fight. Not an amazing fight. And that's fine. It doesn't need to be. This movie is more about the dynamic between Jimmy and Joe. It's not like the fights aren't going to be great. This isn't fucking like a Jet Li, a martial arts film. I'm not expecting amazing fights in it. So Milo ends up getting killed by the police, but then getting killed by SWAT. And then Joe kind of reconnects with his family, gets back with his wife, and then the film kind of... Marcone... This is where Marcone ends up... This is where it's revealed he ends up taking the wrong case. And because the one cop who suspected Joe throughout the film... That's why I didn't really talk about him, because he didn't really have a character in this movie. He just thought, he just thought Joe was the bad guy. But he ends up finding the case with money in it. And Marcone has the case with the bomb. He gets blown up. And then the film basically ends with Joe and Jim becoming partners, and then the film ends. I would have loved a sequel. I actually really like this movie. You know, it's a standard early '90s, late '80s. I kind of mesh them together movie where like that action movie. But I really would have loved a sequel. I thought the best aspect of the film is how their relationship. The bad guys isn't the best. They're very generic. They want money, bad guys, but whatever. That doesn't matter. With movies like this, it's okay to have a one-dimensional villain. That's fine. You know, I expect one-dimensional villains in these movies. But it was an awesome film. Just a fun '90s action film. You know, I thought Bruce Willis did a really good job in this. He didn't feel like I was just watching John McClane. And that's why I don't get some people who say he's a bad actor. I'm like, not every actor is a fucking Tarantino actor or a Scorsese actor. I understand that. I think he does fine in his roles where his roles feel different enough where you don't feel like you're just watching, oh, this is just John McClane in multiple movies. Because there are actors like that. I love Will Smith, but some of his later movies just feel like I'm watching a Will Smith movie. There are some that aren't like that, like an I Am Legend, an I Robot, where he actually feels like he's playing another character. Or even Pursuit of Happiness, even though it's not my type of movie. But you get those but Will Smith sometimes there are just some movies where I'm like, I'm just watching Will Smith. I don't get that from Bruce Willis in this. In this, he feels like a different character, and Damon Wayans did a good enough job to show he can actually be a good, maybe not lead actor, but like the secondary lead. I think he did a good enough job showing that. Milo was a decent bad guy. He's just kind of like a generic hitman, but that's fine. These movies, I don't expect the bad guy to be like have some deep story. You're just a bad guy. Some movie, there's nothing wrong with just a bad guy just being bad just cause, you know. This movie, I think, was a fun '90s action film. I thought Danielle Harris did a good enough job. You know, obviously she wasn't as good as like let's say in mainly Halloween 4 as Jamie, but I thought she was decent in this. Very fun. It's a fun action flick. That's really all I can say. You know, yeah, one-dimensional bad guys, but that's fine. Sarah was just kind of there, but whatever. Same with Halle Berry. She's not in the whole movie, but I actually thought their dynamic was fucking awesome. And I think that's like the biggest positive. The dynamic between um, Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans was fucking awesome. This is one of those that you would not think they would work well together, but my god, they fucking worked well together. I would have actually liked a sequel. You know, like this could have been like a Rush Hour type of thing, but it is what it is. Maybe it didn't make a lot of money because this could have been at that time period people just wanted from Bruce Willis, give me more Die Hard. So, but yeah, guys, I would definitely recommend this film if you just want like a fun early '90s action flick that's an hour and a half to 2 hours. Watch this movie. It's fucking flying. God damn it. Sorry, guys. Anyway, awesome film though. So tomorrow I'm gonna be reviewing The Last Action Hero, one of my favorite Arnold movies. And speaking of Arnold, I'll say it here. God damn it. Sorry, guys. Speaking of Arnold, fuck Arnold. You know, for the whole screw your freedom thing, but Arnold is one of the best he's my childhood. Even though I didn't grow up with his main movies, it doesn't matter. I grew up with them later on. So tomorrow I'm gonna be reviewing Last Action Hero. Probably one of his best movies, one of his more underrated ones. It didn't do great financially. I mainly think it was because you gotta remember this was his first big movie after T2. And people just wanted something on that level, and this movie wasn't that. But I thought this was a fun '90s. This is another example of fun '90s action flick. So I'm gonna be reviewing that tomorrow. So, but yeah, this movie I would give like a 9 out of 10, maybe a 10 out of 10 in like '90s action film. The story isn't great. Not every story needs to be the fucking Godfather or Goodfellas, you know. Not every story needs to be like super elaborate. Some stories can just be simple. And I think this movie does a good job in that. So I definitely recommend this movie. But as usual, fuck Warner Brothers, fuck Disney. And now, in light of recent events, and I usually don't want to go into politics, but I have to, just because in light of recent events, fuck Joe Biden, and fuck his administration. So, there's that. Fuck Joe Biden, fuck LeBron, fuck Simon Liu. But yeah, this movie is phenomenal. Tomorrow, like I said, Last Action Hero review. But yeah, talk to you guys tomorrow. Peace!